Get it.
All right. So the topic for today is media in wrestling and also the crossover with merchandise and in some instances how one can kind of bleed into the other. When I was trying to think of how uh, we could cover both, because I had messaged you and said, hey, can we include merch in this as well? And that made me think of the plaque that they made after WrestleMania 12, for the Boyhood Dream one that was shined
Yeah,
by Son and had
yeah.
a piece of the ring in there.
I
Um,
always wanted one of those. I did. Full disclosure, I always wanted one of those, and I haven't obtained one yet, but I'm not out of the race.
I
Trust me.
I did see one on eBay not terribly long ago, maybe like a year or two, and it I don't remember how much they cost when they first made him, but it was under $300.
Yeah, I think they were. Uh, God, I want to say they weren't any more than $100 back in 1996 when that came out.
Yeah,
Um, but now they're chasing, a couple $100. So they've appreciated a little in value over the years, and as they should. I mean, WrestleMania 12 was extremely important for Shawn Michaels' character, especially, and that match was very important.
yeah.
Um,
I have a friend that I met here a couple of years ago when I went into treatment. She's a ring announcer for a few indie promotions, but when she moved back to Louisiana, she was able to quit her job at Apple to do that full time and travel with them. And she's a huge mark for Seth Rollins. So I was searching for.
I am too, by the way.
Oh yeah, he's definitely. I don't know if I like how they just keep changing him around, but I was looking for something autographed that I could get her for her birthday, and that's when I came across the Boyhood Dream plaque. But
Yeah, and to flash forward at the end of '96, if you remember, they made one for Sid as well when he beat Shawn Michaels for the WWF Championship. They actually had it wasn't as elaborate as Shawn's, where it came with a little piece of the ring, but it did come with a piece of the ring rope, and the rope
hey,
was on the outside. It wasn't laminated nice like the piece of the ring. So like you can actually like touch the rope, and it had a good picture of Sid on top, and it commemorated the Survivor Series match. Which, um, say what you will about Sid and his work rate, but I remember loving that match. To be honest,
well,
I did. It wasn't Brett and or sorry, it wasn't it wasn't Brett and Austin earlier in that. That was the match of the night. But
yeah,
the Sid and Shawn match was awesome,
well,
and
and uh,
I'm just glad they have a plaque to commemorate that. So
yeah, and Tim and I were talking about this. Sid's two world title runs came in the very, very early stages of the Attitude Era, and he beat Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels for both of his title runs.
two of the best workers at the time, arguably, right?
Yeah, and it's not like those matches weren't without some controversy, but at the end of the day, both Bret and Shawn dropped the title to him in the midst of their boiling over in 96 and 97. That I think that says a lot about him and the faith the company had in him, at least to a point.
It's a lot like a Lex Luger case where they get a lot of shit for being shit workers, so to speak, which the definition of work rate or worker are very subjective, as you know. But for Sid's time and for his limited capabilities in the ring, he made the most of what he had. And um, I think at that time in 1996, dare I say, he had to have had more of an important run and was more popular in 96 than he was, like, say, working with Hogan in 92.
Yeah,
I felt anyway, like he was always in the mix somehow, and always involved in something important.
Well,
So
even going back to like Sid Vicious, Sid Justice, he looks, especially back then with his little curly blonde mullet.
I,
I
I,
mean,
I
he,
I'm gonna interject on this one. He looked like Ian Ziering from 90210 on steroids.
yes, I think that's accurate. I mean, he definitely had the look, and pushing over 6.5 feet, flirting with 7 feet. Um, I think he played the role of a big man really well with Hogan, and then with Shawn and Brett. Um, his match with Taker at Mania, when Taker took the belt off him, was kind of
Mhm.
yeah, it wasn't all that great. But I Psycho Sid, I thought, was a great little tune-up to Sid Justice, Sid Vicious, and I thought he worked really well in the landscape in 96, 97.
Yeah. As you know, I was a huge fan of his then. I'm still a fan of his now. And I love that run. And we're speaking of merch, I wore that I Rule the World Sid shirt with pride in high school. And I didn't care how much shit I got for it. I love Sid.
Yeah,
And to this day, if I still had that shirt, I'd wear that to this day. I love Sid that much.
my favorite memory of Sid, Tim and I were at the Springfield Civic Center for a house show. It was when Brett was champion and he was having a cage match for the world title with Sid on the road. And we were in like the first little level, like off of the floor, and it was right by one of the areas into the back.
Mhm.
And I looked down and there was Sid. I mean, maybe 15 feet from me, like straight down there. And I said to Tim, said, "Hey, look." I said, "Hey, Sid, who's the man?" And Sid looked up and went, "Thank you, my friend." And then Tim slapped me and said, "You don't even like Sid."
I I I love that story, and I am always happy when you retell it, and it never gets old to me.
No.
By the way, I got like the hardest fist bump from Sid because at that same show, I was on the floor level in the middle, but I managed to because I was 125 pounds soaking wet back then, so I was very easily able to guardrail it up, right? And I guardrailed it so hard when Sig came out, and I remember he's like, "Who's man?" The
Yeah.
hardest fist bump ever. I mean, intense.
Yeah.
The water, the title, like all of it. It was awesome. It was
Yeah.
one of the best things ever in my life, and I remember that just that hard fist bump. I fist bump many people. My nephew and I do the fist bump all the time, but man, I've never got a harder fist bump than Sid. And at that period, at that night, and speaking of merch, actually, that is I got the I told you this off air. I got the Bret Hart, the last version of the sunglasses, which were pink underneath, but they had like a black lacquer over them.
Yeah.
But pink exposed the for the eyes, and I oh man, I wish I still had those. It was the last pair that Bret had in WWF because
Yeah.
in WCW they never marketed those. Not for
I
Brett
never,
anyway.
yeah, I actually never thought about that. See, I had
Um,
the silver ones when I was a kid, back when he was, still barely breaking out into his own. I didn't get them from him. I think I just bought them at a house show. But
and speaking of silver, and well, I bought mine at the merch stand like everyone else, but like yourself as well. But speaking of which, WCW, those silver shades, they use those for the Nasty Boys of all people. Had the they did their little nasty, the little design there, the little
like the
splatter.
dripping paint or something.
Yeah, the little dripping paint design on a pair of Bret Hart shades. You can look that up, but those did exist in WCW. How available they were at the merch stands there is a mystery, but they had them for the Nasty Boys. Also, the Bret Hart shades, if you remember, Adam Bomb had a pair of they were Bret Hart shades, but they had like the Atom Bomb logo on.
Yeah,
In
those I do
in
remember.
yeah,
I never saw them in person, but I do remember them.
neither did I oh, trust me, those would have been neat to have just for the uniqueness. But
Yeah,
yeah,
that's cool. I liked Adam Bomb. I thought he was great as Wrath in WCW too. I
had a great look. Something was amiss. I felt he had everything Vince liked. He was huge and naturally, and he I don't know. I always felt he had a good babyface run. It's just something was amiss.
yeah, maybe he was in the wrong era. I don't know. I mean, he
Maybe.
actually his gimmick did work pretty good for the new generation. I think. I don't know.
Yeah, they just didn't get the mileage they wanted out of it. I don't.
Yeah.
Like because you never saw Adam Bomb versus Shawn Michaels in the main event, or Adam Bomb versus uh, Kevin Nash as Diesel in the main event. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Never saw that.
I don't even remember him really being in the Intercontinental title picture either.
Had a few one-offs on like some Monday Night Raws and stuff, and maybe some house shows, but yeah, really the funniest thing I ever saw was one of those live event things. It was like I was scrolling YouTube, and you know how they used to do like almost like a command center, like but for WWF for live events at like all the different market specifics. They had
Oh yeah, yeah.
yeah, they had I think I watched this because it was actually part of Sunny's tryout tape when she was Tamara, using her real name, Tamara Sitch or whatever,
Mhm.
or Fitch. I'm not sure, but they had her announcing it was Adam Bomb versus Bob Backlund in a submission match.
Wow, that's
Adam
odd.
Bomb being the submission specialist.
Yeah, and well, and at that time too, they were really big on uh Brett and Bob in their little submission matches. I mean, how eh, at the time I couldn't appreciate it, but how cool is it now looking back, seeing Bob Backlund plucked right out of I mean the ancient of days of WWF and then dropped into the new generation and put in the world title picture. How cool is that?
Good, great for the character. That crazy Bob Backlund character is by far. I just saw him do it. He was actually just doing the character a few weeks ago when I saw him in Springfield, during a indie show appearance,
No
and
way.
yeah, and I didn't even know he was going to be at the signing, but that whole crazy Bob Backlund thing still works, and it still gets a reaction, and it was perfect because here was WWF pushing this new generation thing. Bob Backlund was ousted, if you remember, from the rock and wrestling era of wrestling, and then an era passed him by, and now another era was going to pass him by in the new generation, and he just had enough and just snapped, and it was just perfect. It was absolutely perfect for that time, and I gotta say that's probably not a stretch. You know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
Backlund's a nice guy, but I'm sure that's not a stretch.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and like the the best gimmicks or characters are always just when somebody can kind of be themselves or focus in on one part of their actual personality and crank the volume to 11 and it always seems much more natural.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah. I
uh,
mean, we talked Shawn Michaels. I mean, in 1996, and well, actually, especially 1997, Shawn Michaels, from all accounts, was very much the prick he was on television. He was very much the prick backstage too. So that was nothing new, but it
uh,
worked. His promos were great in '97.
oh yeah, yeah. So today we have media and merchandise. Focus
Yes.
on media across wrestling.
Well, yes. So let's start. The what does media mean to you? What was like the first? What was like one of the first things you remember either renting or buying? Back in the VHS days.
I remember going to Video in Agawam and seeing the boxes for the early WrestleManias, like the WrestleMania 3 and 4, I believe, were both double cassette um, bundles. And I remember very clearly like seeing those. And uh, at this time in like the early 90s, the appreciation for having media on command was not like it is today, where you can yell at your phone and it'll play whatever it is you want. And I can remember being so excited every time I would go in there, either with my parents, or that was just over the bridge for me. So sometimes I go there by myself. But seeing those early VHS tapes of the early WrestleManias or other events around that time, like some of the Survivor Series, just got me so excited. And it's like, yes, I have to get this and watch it. And it was, always a treat.
Nice, nice. Um, my when I first rented VHS, I remember it was I would have to beg. Now I have my stepbrother Ron lived with me at the time. My brother Josh, who's 7 years younger than me, was the baby at the time. This was before my sister was born. So it would be like, and then it would be me. It would be a kid's vote usually, and usually I would get outnumbered 2-1. Over Nintendo games, which I played with them. I would take my turns like everyone else, because that's the thing you did on the weekend. You rented Nintendo games, you played them, whether they were good, bad, or indifferent. And we found out the hard way how bad some of those games definitely were. But once in a while, either it was just because my parents maybe felt bad, maybe because I would always browse, like whenever we would go to like a Blockbuster. We had the Blockbuster that was on Riverdale Road, I remember. And then whenever we would go there, they would have just the clamshells were beat out, and you would just see all the different WWF Coliseum video titles. So I would always just take it and look at it like almost throughout the entire time we were in the store. Once in a while, they would break down and rent a title for me, and I would sneak in during the weekend when I wasn't watching Superstars and every other show on the planet. I would watch this one tape, and my rentals, however, I will say, really ramped up when my mom ended up getting divorced and then met her ex-boyfriend, who also was a huge wrestling fan, and he got a West Coast Video membership, if you remember.
I do.
Uh, if I by Tim's house, oh man, we rented there were so many movies rented. Tim and I, you and Tim, then my house, I rent. We probably ran the gamut of that store and rented so many movies, but
Yeah.
combined. But anyway, my mom's boyfriend loved pro wrestling as well. His name's Tony, coincidentally, also, and he would, encourage, he would be like, okay, you can grab two, and I'm like, oh, I can grab two, great, like, because I wasn't being outnumbered now, because my stepbrother moved away, with his mom. My brother ended up moving in with his dad, so I ended up basically being the only kid in the house on my own on the weekend. So what is a kid to do to entertain himself? You could rent two WWE. So you bet I took full advantage of renting every title. And then when I learned how to dub tapes,
Yeah.
dubbed everything, because I was that fanatical about it. And that leads into the first VHS tape I ever owned. It was actually a best of Hulk Hogan tape, which was like only an hour, and it had like 4 matches from, like, I think WrestleMania. The WrestleMania 3 match is always on every Hogan tape for some reason.
Yeah.
But it had like 3 other Hogan matches from like 90, 91 time period. And I watched that thing constantly. I still have it. It doesn't work anymore, but I still have it. And so those were like the first really, and it just went from there basically.
Yeah. So when do we first see the uh, eh, the invention of watching wrestling outside of a live event where you had to buy a ticket?
Meaning like on television?
Television or Betamax or VHS. Um,
Oh, that would be these. Have my handy visual aids. You had to rent one of
yeah.
these.
Yep.
This is my copy of Jake the Snake Roberts. Now, what I liked about Coliseum Video was whenever you rent from a new video store, you would end up purchasing these down the line or whatever, right? You always got different ones. It was never like some had the same stuff, but like you would always go into a different video store where you find different ones, right?
Yeah.
And you'd be like, oh, that wasn't at my other video store. Great. Let me rent that. I had no idea these existed. But if you actually look on the spine, well, this is a bad example. The spine's covered. But usually you look on the spine down here on the bottom, they're all numbered. So
Oh,
that was
I
an
did not
easy
know
way
that.
of yeah, that was an easy way of figuring it out. But yeah, this particular one is 2 hour tape on Jake Roberts, which just has like random. This is actually the first time I ever saw house show matches. Besides watching like, because I watched a little bit of prime time, but I didn't watch a lot of prime time because I was more Monday Night Raw. So
Yeah.
when I watched these, this was like the way I used to watch like the old house show matches, like the Garden stuff and usually they had a lot of matches from Canada. So
Yeah.
uh,
I remember that they would put out uh well later on DVDs, but like VHS tapes that had uh, matches that were really kind of unknown. And if it wasn't for those little compilations, um, you wouldn't be able to see them. And I remember them being unique in that a lot of the stuff was never broadcasted on any major either pay-per-view or major show. And so they kind of had that uniqueness to them. And that this is the only place you can find those matches or those cards.
yeah, yeah. While they were widespread, meaning Coliseum Video, and you were able to purchase them through the magazines. Not a lot of people I knew actually physically owned Coliseum Video back in the day. They may have had one tape, like it, say if their video store like closed or something, which that's how I ended up getting a couple. Or if video stores closed, you get former rentals and stuff like that. But I didn't know a lot of people who owned Coliseum videos back then because they were still expensive
Oh
and
yeah.
rightfully so. That all the tapes, like I said, Coliseum videos actually blow my shelf because actually you can see in this frame shot here, right up there. Those are like a lot of my Coliseum videos, and they're so heavy. They like again, I don't know what's in them, but the heaviness is just quality. They're like tanks. You put
Yeah.
them in, press play, they still play,
Yeah.
and
And I always appreciated the sealed shut plastic cases that they came into. Um, the the covers would come out a little bit over the edges, and it'd be just kind of like thick plastic, and it just kind of hugged the tape more so than I remember any other type of VHS tape, because a lot of time it just had a cardboard sleeve that it slid into. But the Coliseum home videos were these bulky little tank uh, coffins almost for
yeah,
the
and
VHS tapes.
that's why I pulled that. I pulled one out, for example, and I keep a lot of mine on display. A lot of my paper, they call them paper sleeves. They're really cardboard sleeves. Those are all like those are easier to file away, and to me, they're not as I don't know. Like I think clamshell. The only other thing I think of is Disney movies, right?
Yeah,
So uh, and being a child of the early home video like yourself, I I got a lot of those early Disney movies, rented a lot of those early Disney movies, and they all came in those big, heavy clamshell cases. So I mean, you didn't really associate those clamshell things with too many uh, in the States. It was either clamshell or they had the oversized boxes, which I wish I had out because I have an AWA tape that's in one of those oversized. I call them the porn boxes. So those humongous boxes for no reason. Like, but I have a couple AWA. Um, I want to say it's a Super Clash card on VHS. Yeah. So
So when did Vince start putting out Coliseum home videos? Do you know anything about the kind of history of Coliseum video?
I do know that. Okay. So Vince, almost as soon as the Rock and Wrestling Connection happened, already he had in place, video distribution. And at first, he was going to deal with a little company by the name of Vestron Video. And Vestron Video, I'm not sure if I know Vince wanted to sell the rights for pretty cheap to get his video distribution off the ground, and they didn't go for it. Vestron didn't, which was their loss. So this company out of New York, which became Coliseum Video, their sub company was a porn company. So that all they produced, if you actually do a Google search on Coliseum Video, you'll find WWF stuff and you'll find porn titles as well. So because they were a porno company that their subdivision was Coliseum Video, which produced like the actual WWF stuff. You know what I mean? They're
Yeah,
legitimate companies, so to speak. But I'm not saying porn is illegitimate. I'm just saying, like you associate one business is not associated with the other, and
yeah,
actually, and Coliseum Video did try their hand at Real Sports at one point, because the company was growing by leaps and bounds due to this video distribution, mainly by the WWF tapes. They produced a Wayne Gretzky tape uh,
oh,
on Wayne Gretzky. They produced a Giants tape back in the Lawrence Taylor, when Lawrence Taylor was really riding high with the Giants. So they've done a couple like sports related things, but their bread and butter was WWF.
yeah,
So by far, because I mean, every video store bought those tapes, and every kid rented them. Or you're sitting here right now, or we're talking about it.
I
So
know. See, maybe you can help me visualize this. Truly, I can remember there being a VHS tape that had Hogan and Bundy on the
yep,
cover.
yep.
Was that a Saturday Night's Main Event VHS tape?
No, well, no, that was Mania 2, which I have.
That's right. Yeah, when I
Oh,
was putting
hang
my
on, hang on, hang on, hang on, hang on. I didn't pull this visual aid out, but I'm going to pull it out for your purposes. Is this the one?
that's the one, man. You are a magician. Look at that. That is the one.
Yeah, yeah. It popped Coliseum videos out of my ass. Sure.
And I do remember the two. It's like a bunch of red lines kind of put together. I just remember that, and then Hogan and Bundy.
Yeah, yeah. Not exactly the greatest main event in the world for WrestleMania, but Hogan needed a big heel to work with, and Bundy was the hottest heel at the time.
Yeah, and Hogan was
So
wearing the uh, NWA styled WWF title in there too. That I mean, I know we're jumping back an episode, but I don't remember that title being around for all that long.
no, that was they call it the '85 Hogan. Is that right?
Well, I know the '86 Hogan is it resembles the Intercontinental title more than anything else. Like if you go in the middle, it has like the Roman columns on either
Yeah,
side,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and you've got the banners.
Yeah, and to go with our episode, if you remember, the merch stand for years had that version of the WWF title in foam.
Yep.
I remember it was a black strap, and they sold that. I think they sold that until the Attitude Era even started, to be honest.
Yep. And then the Intercontinental title was brown.
Yes, which always baffled me when I was a kid. I was like, why is this brown?
I did wonder that too. I think it's because the plastic plate looks so similar to the other one. You could get maybe confused as to which is which, and so giving it a different color foam strap would help to
Like,
differentiate
okay,
them.
so in my mind, I had the tag belt, which
The-
was silver, right? And in my mind, it made sense because I remembered that WrestleMania 3 where the Hart Foundation were wearing the silver tag team belts. You know what I mean? Like the plates were silver and stuff. So I'm like,
yeah,
okay, that makes complete sense. Silver, sure, but it's funny how the IC didn't make sense in my mind, but yet the tag did. So
yep. And they never updated those. I mean,
no, they sold them. They sold those all the way until the Attitude Era started. They did come out with the oval Intercontinental title on that brown uh strap, like the same oval, the same design, except they put that oval Intercontinental title design in the middle. You could find it on if you could
really?
find it on eBay. You could probably pop it up. It's weird.
I, I will look at that. See, there's a lot of belt makers, mostly in Pakistan, who make they're referred to as bootleg titles because they don't have the copyright permission to use any of the logos or designs. But I don't know if it would really be worth trying to extradite somebody on a copyright infringement for a wrestling belt. So they'll probably get away with that forever. But I have seen, and you and I talked about this a little while ago, that some people are remaking the foam belts today. It's the
Yeah, which
same
is
exact things. Yeah, like bootleg foam belts. How cool is that?
it's cool and it's hilarious at the same time because they're made for our audience. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Guys that are in 30 something 40s that remember those belts from the from when you went up and you went to the old shop and you bought them, like
Yep.
there was no way back then, it wasn't mass marketed like it was. Yeah, you had your Hasbros. Yeah, you had your Galoobs, WCW Galoobs in the stores, but you did not have access to, say, a red and yellow Hulk Hogan shirt unless you went to the event and bought one. So
Yep.
it was a completely different business back then, and most of it was mail ordered. So
Yeah. And there weren't like you said, like independent stores set up to sell merchandise really anywhere. And by this point, um, like the mid to late 80s where they were cranking this stuff out, um, I don't think it would be worth it for them to try to get that stuff in Kmart or Caldors or um, something like that, and then licensing that out to a toy manufacturer. I don't know. I just take a look at like the belt collector scene now, or even going on WWE Shop right now, and I, they have to make a killing on selling these replica titles. And someone like me who was, really trying to get into this way back when, like I actually wrote Joe Marshall a letter asking him about like getting a real intercontinental title back in the early to mid 90s. And I just never made sense to me why those things were not uh, mass produced. And now, you can walk. Didn't you say that you can buy a WWE world title at Walmart?
yes, in fact, they're not in Walmart very often. You know what I mean? It'll be just one of those things where it's just that you go in there, they did like maybe a restock, and there it is.
Yeah.
It comes in a humongous box, but it's the real, the with the big W on it, and it's the real replica belt. There it
Yep.
is, just sitting on the shelf. What was it? 150, $200 at Walmart,
The
something like that.
the commemorative ones, the plastic ones, I mean, still really nice plastic ones are 200 and they go on sale for like 150, quite a
Okay,
bit.
yeah. I think that's honestly what it is,
Yeah.
to be honest. I mean, I think it's a little pricey to put on just sitting on a Walmart shelf without any security, but
And that is odd. And I can remember like the early 2000s when I got out of the military, um, moved back to Massachusetts. I was still with Dixie, Tim was with Jen, and you start to see the Figures Inc. titles that were very, very hard to come by. Or
yep.
Reggie Parks was still alive and kicking then, and Dave Milliken was, um, the well, him and Joe Marshall. Joe Marshall came in like the late 90s to start redesigning the belts, so WWF could own the copyright to them. Um, but Joe Marshall was. I belong to a couple forums. You and I talked about Russ.
Yes. Hmm.
Yeah, yeah, and I had talked with him. And Joe Marshall, there were some people I know they sent Joe Marshall $6,000. 3 years later, nothing. And so
Jeez.
um, and so they got really creative with the logos because you can't have WWF, the old block logo, because they do copyright that. And so now it's an FWF, or WCW became WOW, just these slight little things so they can get away. But you could do that. And uh, with it was with Milliken or Parks. I'm pretty sure it was with Dave Milliken. You could get in touch with the WWF, maybe WWE by this point, and for $2,000, you could get a license for him to make you an actual WWF logo title. Just the fee for him to put the actual logo was $2,000, and then the belts were between $2,000 and $3,000. So if you had $5,000, you could get literally what they're wearing on TV. And
Just for a cool 5 grand.
yeah, and now WWE does sell, I think it's called the Elite Series replica title. You said that you've seen one of these in person, right?
Yes, and they look fantastic. They're pretty damn close to the real thing.
Yeah, they're
Uh,
$2,000.
yeah, and people will pay it.
Yeah,
Trust me. It's you don't see one in a crowd when you go to a WWE show. You see many in a crowd.
yeah,
So they're getting their money. WWE is, and that is merchandise on another level. You know.
yeah. And even with having bootleg belt makers, there's a lot of re-leathering shops that have opened up. But now, since the network logo that they have now has lots of cubic zirconias in there, there are guys who will restone a belt. That's all they do. Like, you can send your title to them and they will pluck everything off of, say you get like your um, $300 or $200 uh, commemorative title,
Mhm.
or you probably need the metal one, but they'll restone them, and that's like you can make good money doing that now. It's just crazy how involved the uh, merchandise and like the diehard fans, like everybody we've talked about, and you and I think it's all to try to get as close as we can to that experience of in our heads at least being in the ring, winning that title, or just looking at it. And it's for me, it's I think it's my trying to connect with my uh, childhood wrestling heroes, but just trying to again just get as close as possible to that title that at least once upon a time meant so much.
Well, what you and I've always had an appreciation for belts as well, and the craftsmanship that goes into them. You and I both know that you have always been the belt guy. I've always been the consuming the media guy. You know, like, hey, let's buy every book and magazine and videotape and DVD with a wrestler on it, and ooh, here it is. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which I think down the road for me kind of screwed me because that's far more costly.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well,
but I think you're doing it smart. But for me, not so much. Because
well,
I still collect to this very day, and I'm very proud to say I still do. So
yeah, but your appreciation for media, it goes way outside of wrestling as well. I mean, even when we were, um, teenagers trying to hunt down uh, rare CDs of like live performances, you were always um, really, really big on that and had an appreciation for.
and again, to this day, still am.
Yeah,
I still go once a month at least, or once every 2 months to Music Outlet in Enfield, and spend
yeah,
quite the pretty penny on stuff. You know what I mean? Like rare. It could be like a new release of something I have already, but it's like has bonus discs and outtakes and all that nonsense. So you ought to see my Black Sabbath collection. It's nuts. So, but that's just one band. But
yeah. And
but
like,
yeah, like when I was heavily into Metallica, yes, that as you know, I spent every penny on bootlegs, imports. Of course, we have more music stores to choose from back then, in the Holyoke, in the old Holyoke, all that is.
yep.
So,
Well,
uh,
and like you were doing this long before it was the hipster thing to do. Um, your appreciation for media of really any kind was uh, I think was much more genuine and wasn't trendy. I mean, even just looking at everything behind you on the wall and on the shelf, like a true bona fide archivist. Um,
yeah, or true bona fide bonehead, depending on how you look at it. But yeah, or self-proclaimed. But yeah, I I just and even like if I go on YouTube like or watch a really good documentary that's like say on television or on streaming somewhere, right? I will not only just watch one documentary, I will watch multiple documentaries on the same thing because and I always felt the same way about music as I felt about wrestling too, is there's so many different vantage points and different perspectives on things that you want to get everything in and kind of draw your own conclusion to either why you like it, why you dislike it. You know what I mean? Like your thoughts, your views, just to get a full honest opinion on things,
yeah,
you know?
a much more comprehensive understanding of
Right.
what something is or how many different points of view you can learn about.
Yeah, so it's more for me. It's more of that. Why else would I own WrestleMania 3 5 6 times? I don't know.
Well, and one of my big notes for this episode um, is preservation versus copyright.
Mhm.
And we did briefly touch upon this in our other episode, but this one, just because you can hop on YouTube or the WWE Network and watch something, a lot of times, uh, due to copyright laws either not changing or changing too much over time, these events and these things that are deeply meaningful for us can have a lot of that meaning just kind of gutted out.
Yeah, I'm Peacock's a great example because while I love having WWE as well as other NBC shows at my and Universal movies at my fingertips, you go back and you watch. I mean, man, you watch an ECW episode or an ECW event, that
Yeah,
music's gone. Like all the fondness that you remember, gone completely. The event is still there, and the bone structure of that event is still great.
yeah,
But where it's lost on me in presentation is the musics, just the overall the rawness of it is just completely gone, you know. And WWE does this with their own product as well. And if you're a Star Wars fan, I'm sure you've gone through this a billion times, you know what I mean? Like, because Lucas himself likes to change his movies around
Yeah.
and insert things where they shouldn't be, and
Yeah.
take things out, and you know, like, so saying that, and the reason I'm saying this is because in wrestling, I mean, this is nothing new in the realm of all media, you know, because this happens.
Yeah. And this is a actually really fun kind of rabbit hole to go on, but there's two things I I want to say. When you brought up like Lucas, so you have the definitive editions on VHS in the 90s before the prequels come out.
Hmm.
And there is something to be said for somebody to say, hey, this is the definitive version. By definitive, this is my creation. This is my story. And I wanted to tell it like this, but for whatever reason, we couldn't. And I I love stuff like that. And you know, if you are a um, creator and you can kind of further explain your story, I'm all for it. But at the beginning of those movies, they had a uh, little almost like a 2-minute documentary about what happened when they took the old film out to restore it and how faded some of it was, how damaged some of it was, and said that, which I believe is true, had they waited a whole lot longer, they might not have been able to save the original footage of this. But they said that during the process of creating the definitive versions, the film was destroyed, which doesn't make any sense. And that just makes me think, hey, the Library of Congress has Star Wars in it. Are you going to go down there and pull out the old version and give them this one? And
See,
to
this
the
this is where vantage points come in.
yeah, and here's my little bow on my little tangent here. Sorry. um,
No, 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 no. It's all good. I had to interject that though.
yeah. Yep. Um, you if you're a creator and that's your story, that's fine. But once you give it to the world, you may own a copyright, but that is no longer entirely yours. It just isn't. You know, we don't get royalties from Star Wars movies, but that belongs to the fandom as well.
Yeah.
So if you want to retell something, fine. But just because you own the copyright, I don't think, in my mind, and it's really up to each individual, um, you no longer get to decide what is canon, what isn't canon. You have shared it with the world. You've been compensated for that. It is now everybody's. So um, you brought up Peacock and the WWE Network, and there are so many things on there that probably were never released or released in such a limited way that it is great to be able to have that library. But on our last episode, we talked about how integral a wrestler's theme was to their character, to their performance, and it is a huge part of their work in the ring. So there are some instances where changing or dubbing over a wrestler's theme song with re-recorded Howard Finkel in introductions really does it makes me kind of disenchanted with those
Very
things that used to
distracting.
be so fun.
Very
Sorry.
distracting. No, no, it's just very distracting when you like something like that happens, because then the audio goes way up, and it just, you can tell something is not natural about it, you know.
Yeah.
But getting back now, trying to think, brain, nope, got it. So so wrestling in like wrestling in the media there, and like, so in readable form. Uh, do you recall like anything like you first had that you like you were able to like read and consume? You know what I
Um,
mean? Like just constantly flip pages and read about wrestling.
the PWI Almanac.
Oh, the which edition?
That I'm not sure. Um, I got it. I got it from CVS by the middle school, but I didn't even know something like that existed. And when I saw that, I mean, I could have cried. I was so happy.
Yeah, that was a great source of inspiration and information for me, because I had explained in the first episode, I was the guy who read all the results to every city, town, state, whatever, you know what I mean? Like I wanted to read about results all around the world, and here it is right in front of you. But you also had title results, and you had and titles were vacated, and this was why, and this title's defunct, and this is why. News stories from decades past, was it's all right there in digest form.
Yeah,
It was great. I actually have all mine. I have them all in my closet, and
yeah.
yeah.
There really
They're in the
wasn't anything like that anywhere else at the time.
No, no. This I mentioned this because the first book I remember seeing in stores. Look at this beast. You remember this book at all?
No, I don't.
It is an old George Napolitano book. See all his photos,
Is that
and
Luger?
yes, it is. Right down here, if you
Yeah.
actually zoom in.
And
Of
then
course, Hogan
Hogan.
sold books, so of
Yeah,
course, he gets the biggest. He gets the biggest picture. But you have Warrior, you have Sting, you have a good picture of Flair with the big gold
I
on
know.
there.
What year is that from?
Oh, this came out. This had to have been early '90s. Let me just flip through real quick.
Because that doesn't even look like Hulkamania Hogan on there.
No, it's not. Nine times out of ten, whenever they used, oh yeah, this was early '90s. This was like 91, 92. But half the time when they used Hogan pictures, it was always 1991. So half the time when they use Hogan pictures, they always tended to use old pictures. That's why if you notice, like his Fu Manchu may be black or his hair may have roots. You know what I mean? Like stuff like that. But if you like flip it through, um, stuff like this. Okay, so if you ever want to know what Warrior looks like in Jimmy Hart's sunglasses, there he is.
Oh my goodness.
Oh my, yes,
Oh my.
yeah.
Okay.
Uh, Bushwhackers on the back.
Were they the bushwhackers or the sheep herders?
Well, I think this picture they're the sheep herders, so you can tell by the flag. But
Yeah.
come on, they're wearing their bushwhackers gear. But
Yeah.
yeah, Tim and yourself like to talk bushwhackers, so I figured.
Yeah. Yeah. We've had a lot of fun diving into them.
Now, a little backstory on this. I bought this. No, I was gifted this actually by Scott Teal of Crowbar Press when I went to Charlotte this last year. This book originally came out when I was a kid, and you were a kid also. I saw it at like an Ames or a Kmart or something in the book section in the back, right? And I wanted this book for my 10th birthday, I remember, and I didn't get the book. One of my grandmother on my stepdad's side was going to buy it for me, but instead she bought me about $20-30 worth of wrestling magazines, which gave you about that much of a stack back then.
Yeah.
So I was bummed about the book, but I was internally grateful for the magazines because it was great. But yeah, for years I've always seen this pop up, and I just never thought to pull the trigger. And then when I saw it on Scott Teal's table, I bought a ton of books from him before, and previous to the day, and he's like, you want the book? Just I'm like, really? He's like, yeah. I'm like,
How
great.
cool is that?
Yeah, yeah, and it's a book that means a lot to me. So I mean, it has double meaning, So I'm happy to have it. But getting back to we got magazines here too. Now, this magazine right here the very first WCW magazine I ever bought with my own money was this it wasn't this magazine in particular, but it was same magazine.
Yeah.
This one's actually fully intact with the poster. So poster of the Steiner brothers, if you can see.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you better believe I 9-year-old me had this on his wall. So I was a
Yeah.
big fan of the original Masters and the original Suplex City, which was the Steiner brothers.
Yeah.
But
I had a lot of WWF magazines. I had like those in Nintendo Power. I actually had, or like the only two magazines I um ever really had. But I had a lot of those that are all lost to time.
there
Look,
we go.
he's a baby in that picture. He's
Hey,
so young.
probably about in his mid 30s in this picture.
There's
However, who's not a baby in the picture? Look at,
Chuck Norris, who
yeah, we got
just
an
turned 82.
yeah, and it looks great for his age.
Yeah.
So looks great for any age. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think they interview him about the this was around Survivor Series '94 time. So remember, he was the special enforcer
Yeah.
in the Yokozuna casket match with Undertaker.
Yeah. That's the one where Taker turns into a ghost and floats up to heaven, right? At the
No,
end.
no, different casket match. That was Royal Rumble '94. Uh,
Oh,
I love that though. For his character, that was great.
yeah. So you have some, I don't want to say that some magazines weren't legitimate, but you had official magazines for WCW, official magazines for the WWF. And
Yep.
then we have what are commonly referred to as dirt sheets.
I don't have one of those in front of me, but I do have a Meltzer sheet. Yes.
Yeah. So when did, maybe we can talk specifically about Dave Meltzer, but when did he kind of show up, and what was he doing that was different than what any other publication or any official publication was doing?
From all accounts, he's been doing it since 1982. So as old as us, basically. And he more did it. It was an analytical point of view, but it was also more in a serious manner. You know what I mean? Because a lot of these, while WWF magazine, while they had great pictures and were they were a good source of information for your storyline purposes and everything else. They weren't, you know what I mean? Like
They were still done in kayfabe.
kayfabe. You know, same with the WCW magazine, kayfabe. However, it was this one was done by I do believe they dabbled into other magazines like in the Pro Wrestling Illustrated like kind of realm. That's who actually printed this, and unlike Pro Wrestling Illustrated, these were all in full color. So, but yeah, the Meltzer sheets, and then you had yeah, there was an underground movement of a lot of Wrestling Observer, uh,
The Torch.
was the Torch. These were all underground sheets, which not a lot of people knew about unless you were privy to, you know, basically breaking kayfabe and figuring out how to get your hands on some of these sheets. It was a very limited number of people who were actually subscribed to these sheets. I do
Mhm.
know that they came out weekly, and they always had like the latest because Meltzer had spies everywhere back then, and so he would figure out, you know, correspondence, whatever. So I call them spies. They so he had like different results from different house shows, some insider information as to where storylines were really going, and sometimes it was like months or years in advance even.
Yeah.
So um all that stuff came in the early 80s. Didn't really come to prominence, I don't think, until like the late 80s and into the 90s. More in the mid to late 90s for sure, when especially when you know, WCW and WWF were involved in the Monday Night War thing. So of course that ramped up the sheet business, where everyone, even including people in the business, were reading them constantly. and
Well, and
subscribing. So
and by then you start to see some of the uh, earliest websites and online communities.
yes, onewrestling.com, which I remember yeah, the onewrestling.com, which dealt a lot with the backstage of the ECW uh,
Mhm.
elk back then, because you had Dave Shearer, Mike Johnson was a correspondent, a lot of these guys writing for him, and yeah, that was more internet age. They had printed form, but it wasn't long. You know, internet was the way of the future. So and now it leads to little, you know, basically apps on your phone now, or your tablets, or wherever you're consuming. You could just
Yep.
basically click on it and get the news. So
Yep. So we have uh, wrestling starts getting broadcast on television, and then we have closed circuit shows, the precursor to what a pay-per-view was.
yep.
And then we have pay-per-views, and throughout this time there was still lots of printed media. And then we start to go into streaming. Well, that's actually I guess jumping ahead just a little bit, but when did we first see like the first events for WCW and WWF, the earliest times of closed circuit television and uh, regular pay-per-views?
Now this is where WCW, NWA at the time, had the hot hand. They had the first Starrcade in '83, which was closed circuited and was very successful. Which led, actually, in my opinion, I've always said this: two events led to WrestleMania 1. In my opinion, okay, it was Andy Kaufman and Jerry Lawler in Memphis. You know, showing that you could properly use a celebrity and it doesn't hurt your promotion one bit at all. And in fact, you can get the most mileage with the celebrity that you can on a big event. Number two, Starrcade. Starrcade being the first closed circuited event that was widely available, which had the big main event feel. So, in my opinion, those two concepts were taken to create the first WrestleMania. You know, without those two events, the first WrestleMania, in my opinion, does not exist. Also, underline that with the rock and wrestling connection, as we discussed in the last episode, where David Wolf, Cyndi Lauper meet Captain Lou on a plane, and Captain Lou, Cyndi Lauper's manager boyfriend, is a fan, and Captain Lou connects him with Vince, and the rest is history. So you
How
have
did you?
all these
So,
events marrying up, you know, and that's when the atomic bomb went off, basically, in pro wrestling.
yeah, how were people able to watch closed circuit events back then before you had calling a 900 number to order a Mike Tyson fight or Royal Rumble?
You rented out, it was basically rented out movie theaters and or real theaters, like theaters, like, say, uh um theaters that would broadcast, like, say, a play, or you
Like
know, any other
Broadway
event.
stuff.
Right, right. So you would rent out these different small, but like on a smaller scale. So you would rent out these small theaters slash movie theaters, and you were able to get it that way. Um, I know that you had mentioned on our very first episode, when you watched WrestleMania 6 for the first time, you saw it at a bar. So it's I know that practice did exist back then, meaning like somehow you can get a stream at your. It still exists to this day with you know, NFL packages and stuff at sports bars, because of course they have to pay a licensing fee to show
Yeah,
any sports related at
yeah. Like
TV.
one event is like 5 or 10 grand to show it at any kind of business
Right,
like that. And back
right.
then, you would uh, like at the bar, it was like 19.99 or 15.99, and they paid the same amount that you would if you were at home, and then they could use that to draw people in for their own business.
Yep. And I gotta assume on some smaller levels it worked the same way, but for the most part it was just theaters, small theater houses and and movie theaters, of course, major or small, you
Yeah.
know, and drive-ins very much existed back then too, if you remember. So I'm not sure if closed circuit was drive. And you know what's funny is they've gone back to that because now due to Fathom events, they have, of course, they have different Broadway plays and all that stuff, but they broadcast wrestling through Fathom events now, and you can get the AEW pay-per-views and or the WWE. Well, they call them premium events now, but pay-per-views through. You can go to a movie theater now and watch them. So
Huh.
it's gone completely full circle.
Yeah. And they're making a lot more money on it now than they did back then.
Oh yeah. Well, especially in the streaming age, yeah, you're charging at a minimum like $10 a head. You're in the black right there, you know.
And with COVID ushering us into the second dark age here, you see like even Marvel movies, you can send them out to a theater, but there's maybe 3 theaters open in the entire country. And so they're releasing them. You can rent them for like $50 on Disney Plus, or they'll just release them to a top tier level streaming package that you can get.
The only one I've seen do it right, and this is ironic considering WWF's early roots on HBO, is HBO Max does it correct, where they release a movie that's brand new in theaters that you have the option. You can go to the theater, you can watch it at home, but it's only for a limited time. Like say it's 30 days.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? So you have 30 days to watch this brand new movie, or else you're asked out and oh,
you have to buy it on
sorry.
Blu-ray later.
Yeah, it's like, oh, sorry. So they're the only ones, in my opinion, that have done it right. As far as that goes for options,
Mm.
if you're a very frugal, or you know what I mean, you just don't want to pay the $30 to $50 on Disney Plus for set movie.
Yeah, yeah. I've never been a huge fan of paying for media. Um, that's
And
as
sadly, I
far
have.
as I'm gonna talk about this. I know, way back when. Nah, I don't want to talk about that now. um, and then you have the advent of pay-per-views, and right around that time,
Pay-per-view. Yes.
yeah, and Coliseum Home Video kind of morphed into the WWF putting out all of their events on DVD.
Yep. Yep. I just showed WrestleMania 15 right here. This is actually the first DVD ever released by WWF.
Is
Very
it really?
first one. They now WWF, their deal with Coliseum Video ended around 1997. That's when I don't know what happened. The contract just completely ended. Bruce Pritchard claims that he never understood why it took so long for Coliseum to basically get a video into production. He just never got it. So maybe it was because WWF wanted um the fee. Basically they wanted all the money for themselves. It was why WWF home video was created.
Yeah,
So if you look, it says on here, it does not say Coliseum Video, it says WWF home video,
yeah,
which came around 97, 90, like late 97, early 98 was when we started seeing this pop up. And then, of course, when the Attitude Era kicked off, that's when the video releases kicked off, new and old. They released, they tried releasing as much as humanly possible. But DVDs, they were very, now while DVDs came out in 95, WWF, of course, it being wrestling, they were very slow to catch up. But when they did, this is what opened the floodgates. And then from here, it just led to DVD releases among DVD releases.
Yeah,
So
like with you have DVDs, and then there'll be the Blu-ray HD DVD war. Um, for me, this is the peak of physical media, and
yes.
very shortly into like the early 2000s, uh, we have Netflix, and I know that there's probably a more nuanced understanding to that than what I have, but um, DVD collections, being able to rip and burn DVDs. There's copyright issues again. That my big talking point that I really want to pick your brain on is preservation against copyright. But that, right around this time, and a little bit after is the peak of physical media.
Hmm. And the peak and the reason WWF home video, which later became WWE home video, was so successful was because, and I'll pull out examples here. Something like this right here. Don't mind all the slathered autographs all over it. This is my Ric Flair and the Four Horsemen DVD,
So whose
and
autograph is on that?
everyone with the exception of, obviously not the living horsemen or the dead Four Horsemen, which would be Pillman and um, sorry, Pillman and Benoit were the two that were deceased. So I tried getting every living member of the Four Horsemen on it, and I'm short too.
Unbelievable.
And they were both pseudo horsemen. That would be Jeff Jarrett and Kendall Windham. So one of these days,
You
one
got
of
Paul
these
Roma
days.
on there?
Oh yeah, he signed right
Really?
across his face, right in.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Look at
Yep.
that. What about Mongo?
Mongo, yes, he is. Where is he? Right here on the back.
That
That
is
would be,
so cool.
yeah.
Yeah. He's seen better days. And I know that he was not the most popular horseman, but when I first started watching WCW, he was, the big meathead of the horsemen. So um
You'll never get a complaint out of me with Mongo. He, from all accounts, he lived the part of being a horseman. So, you know, was he great in the ring? No, but was he was better than most. I mean, considering how many seasons that he played at such a high level in the NFL,
yeah.
and what he was able to do in his later life in WCW, I'd say he was probably better than 60%. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah, because he did have
That-
a very legitimate NFL career. There's a lot of guys that kind of flirted with both sports, but it didn't necessarily have. Goldberg is obviously one of the first ones that comes to mind, and so he did play with the NFL, but he's much more well known for being Goldberg in WCW, and I know Mongo is really known and held up to have been very accomplished in both.
oh yeah, yeah, and he played for the most famous Super Bowl team ever, arguably. The '85 going into '86 Bears. So it's like,
Yep.
and again, I mean, so many seasons both on a college level and a professional level of just high level football.
Yeah.
And he more than lived up to his part. And like I said, by the time he got into pro wrestling, this was post football and post all those seasons. So, to learn something like pro wrestling later in life, like he did, I mean, because he was probably in his 40s then. So,
Yeah.
you got to give the guy credit. Now, like I said, he was better than 60% of the wrestlers. You'll never get an argument out of me with Mongo
Yeah.
and his legitimacy in the Horseman, because again, from all accounts, he was a horseman.
Yeah.
He liked the party, brother. He liked
Yeah.
the party. So,
All right. So I have kind of a uh, sidetrack question for you.
go ahead.
Um, when Tim and I were reviewing another the when did Roddy Piper beat the Mountie? for the
Royal
IC
Rumble,
belt.
Royal Rumble 92.
There we go. There is footage from the show in Springfield of the Mountie and Brett in the ring. And Tim and I talked about this. I don't specifically remember watching that, but I absolutely remember that they announced over the PA system that Brett had a fever, Brett was sick. They made that known. And there is, at least at some point, a very handy cam style shot of the Mountie pinning Brett and then Piper coming out. Do you know what WWF or later WWE, like for things like that were never televised and aren't on the network now, was there always maybe a policy to try to record some parts of it, maybe on like a Sony Handycam or something?
Yeah, because and that just didn't just happen in Springfield. Trust me, I wish I knew where that footage was because I'd love to see it. I'm sure the match was the shits, but you know, and I mean, it was Bret Hart versus the Mountie, for God's sakes, you know. Not a technical masterpiece if you're claiming to be sick, right?
Yeah, but
Even if it is Bret Hart, you know, I mean, we're all human, we all have our limitations, but they did stuff like that all the time where they would just record. Go back to the curtain call. They had entrance footage and exit footage of the curtain call. The footage that we saw of the Click, you know, breaking kayfabe and hugging each other and all that. That was done by a fan in the crowd who snuck a handy cam in, but the other footage was professionally shot by WWE, so
yeah,
or WWF at the time. So they would go around with like little cameras all the time doing that. Another example in that same building was when Kevin Nash won the belt as Diesel.
yeah,
You know, they have the footage of him beating Backlund with poor lighting and all that stuff. So, my okay. So what I'm trying to say is, WWF. I mean, they honestly, whether it was for a house show, whether it was for something televised, um, but mainly for house shows, they probably always had somebody with a camera on them at all times.
yeah.
So,
Probably not a very high level of production, but it was chronicled and kept.
and why it was kept, I don't know. If they plan on releasing it later in a real unearthed archive collection, I would love to see it. Honestly,
Yeah,
Christ, it took me about 30 years to get that you know, Hogan versus Flair match from Springfield and Mr. Madness versus Jake the Snake from Springfield
yeah,
on the same card, which we finally got. And much to my disappointment, it was a shitty match with a shitty finish with Hogan and Flair. So,
yeah,
you know, you would say some things are worth the wait. That was not worth the wait.
yeah. I do have a note too about the curtain call because WWE has reached out to that fan who, by all accounts, illegally recorded that, and then it leaked. WWE has, like, that guy's been in like some documentary style scenes for little things that they've put together in the network, like little documentaries, and I've even interviewed him. And so, for as hard as these big companies, how hardline they are with copyright and licensing and everything, and especially how controversial that particular shot was, I do think that was pretty cool that he's been interviewed, wasn't put on trial or sued or anything, and again, for as serious as copyright infringements are, even back then, how how cool is that? That all these years later, they're like, "Hey, you got us."
Yeah, well, if it wasn't such an important, it was in the most important building WWF ever runs, right? Arguably Madison Square Garden. And it was one of the most important events in, I would say, in the last 25 years. That
Yeah,
curtain call changed everything, but very few knew about it. and certainly very few knew that there was footage that existed. Of course, I did because I got it via tape trade. So of course I knew it existed. I think I had like I only had like 3 matches on that tape. I remember I had like a Godwin's and Body Donna's match where the Godwins actually win the belts. Razor and Hunter and Sean and Diesel were the only 3 matches on my tape.
Oh,
So and I got to see all 3 of those in the shittiest quality. I got to see all 3 of those because that was like that had to have been a 5th generation dub. So
yeah. Yeah.
but I got to see it, and it's cool that stuff like that exists. You know,
Yeah.
that's merchandise on another level where you're like, you know, and for a person like me who likes to collect things, that's great, you know, and it's important.
Yeah.
So
And I can just imagine like the look on Vince's face when that probably uh, was sent around internally in like an email, and there they are, and Sean's champion. The outsiders are heading to the mortal enemies of Vince and his promotion, and
yeah,
it just I've never believed fully in every interview I've seen with Sean, Hunter, Hall, and Nash that they've ever been. I don't think they've even been halfway honest about, oh, well, we thought we could do this, and then there was this. I think that they're, even today, they're still shoveling shit, and are not completely honest as to how that came about, if it was organic or whatever. They just didn't know that it would ever get out of that little arena. And like you said, that's one of the most impactful unaired house show events, I think, in all of wrestling.
well, considering that I like probably the rest of the wrestling world who you know, Scott Hall just passed, and of
Yeah.
course a lot of Scott Hall footage is surfaced on YouTube as of recent, and of course I've gone down that rabbit hole too, where both in interviews with Hall and Nash, where they were very fond of saying it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission. You know, um, why would Jim Cornette, why would all the traditionalists, Gerald Briscoe, Lanza, all those guys, why would they be pissed off at all these guys when they came back through the curtain? There's been verified reports that actually I do believe Pritchard was pissed off about that as well.
Oh yeah.
So you know, being, and because Pritchard was young like those guys, but he was very much raised traditional, like and yeah, why would they be so pissed off about it? Because they knew the significance. It's
Yeah.
Madison Square Garden. You know, it wasn't fucking Des Moines. No
Yeah.
disrespect to Des Moines. I mean, but I'm just saying it's not Des Moines. You know,
Yeah. So the other side of media merchandise, sort of the other side. You definitely have a lot of unique, fun, and sometimes just silly little pieces of merchandise throughout wrestling history, and you always have. Even back in the 90s, we had the little uh, little blue wrestling ring, and I had Jake the Snake, his little rubber Damien, the Big Boss Man, and toys have also evolved throughout time. But where
mm-hmm.
do how does merchandise sit in the business of pro wrestling and within the fandom of professional wrestling?
Merchandise is everything. Again, you talked about feeling with buying a title belt, feeling a little bit closer to, you know, the a little bit closer to the action, right? And you have more of a piece of it, more ownership, you know. It's the same way with anything you consume. I just happen to like well, I mean, you can look in the background. I got tons of stuff just sitting right there, you know. But my favorite pieces have always been things to read, things to watch, because I mean I can never stop reading or watching wrestling at all. You know, at any stage of my life, I've just been a fan for too long, and I realize there are some people like me, but there aren't some people like me. Where some like you collect the title belts, and that's great too. You have others that collect action figures, which is fantastic. And yes, you are right. Action figures. I mean, that was the early part of our childhood with playing with figures. You know, in your head, you're creating these different scenarios. You're basically armchair booker back
Yeah.
when you're 7, 8, 9 years old. You know, when these Hasbro's are on the scene, or if you go back even further, you know, your LJNs. We were more of the Hasbro ilk, so I'm gonna go with Hasbro, and then later, I, I I didn't really get into the Jacks like a lot of people did, but I was more Hasbro oriented. But like I said, if something cool pops up over the years, I mean, as you could see, I literally go out and I buy it. You know, like just because it's to me it's cool.
Yeah.
Um,
An
I
avid
mean,
collector, passionate about wrestling.
yes, I mean, you know, as far as media goes, I mean, I'll always collect these. We talked about theme musics, you know, being edited out of certain things, messing with everything. You know, here's my copy of November to Remember 1996, signed by
RF
Ted.
video.
Yes, the good old RF video. And you know, because they partially own the rights to ECW, still do, they can put these out. And I am so happy to have this copy, you know, and this is great. And to me, this is to me this is better than any action figure, any belt. But that's just me, you
When
know.
was that put out?
What's that?
When was that put out by RF video?
Well, at some probably at some point in the mid 2000s, they started when they really started to hammer DVDs out. They digitally basically they just digitize all the tapes. So this is a digital copy of the VHS, the two tape set that you would get
Does it
from.
still have all the copyrighted entrance themes?
Yes, yep,
Yeah.
exactly why I have it. Yes. So, and if you look, there you go. Disc one, disc two is actually tape one, tape two. So if you ordered it back then in the white box, which these were a massive upgrade because here you have picture art, you know. So before you just had the white box, but however they came in these white packaging,
Yeah.
so
Like Nintendo
it
Wii
kind of
games.
keeps the theme up, you know. But you know what's funny is in it's I'm gonna bring up Cornette again because he's actually a part of this. He had famously said that heels did not sell merchandise and didn't have much merchandise, which is true for a lot of years. I remember DiBiase was one of the few that was actually merchandised by WWF, if you remember.
He had a
So
wrestling buddy.
he had a wrestling buddy. He had a bank, like a like a piggy bank. You can. It was a dollar bill wrapped around with DiBiase's face in the middle, and you could put money in this little bank. Right? It was probably about yay big. And I remember concocting my friend Josh and I concocting a story on how. Remember those WWF Spotlight magazines
Yes.
where it would profile different wrestlers, which those were great too. Um, I remember DiBiase was the only bad guy on the cover of one of these. And in our minds, we were thinking, DiBiase, he had to pay to get on one of those because there's no bad guys in these. So
That's a fun little story.
yeah, but heels, if you don't remember, were mass merchandise. So you have to do things like this where you take a copy of the movie Midnight Express and have it signed by all the members of the Midnight Express in gold. So this is what I would normally do at conventions. I would the many conventions I attend over the years, the easiest thing for me to carry is the slipcovers of DVDs because I can grab a lot of them and they just fit in a file folder. So That's what I would do, and that's what I did with this one. I got every member of the Midnight Express I could to sign this.
How cool
Now,
is that?
yeah, no members are in this movie, but the theme definitely is. But it's a classic example of there was no merchandise for the Midnight Express. They may have had like one WCW shirt back in the early 90s. That was it, and who knows how well that sold or if it sold at all even.
Yeah.
But I know it was available. Um uh yeah, just the being to get to hammer the point because I digress quite a bit, but I was a media guy. You're a belt guy. There are figure guys. There are people who collect ring worn stuff, which that is again a lot like the belt collecting, where it is on another level. This
Yeah.
is like beyond belt collecting
Oh
because
yeah.
people will pay thousands, sometimes millions of dollars to own a real piece of the action.
Yeah.
And that's great too, and they're preserving it for different reasons, and mm,
I mean, you had merchandising in the 80s and the golden age. And
mhm.
I remember, I have this little NWO shirt
Yes,
in,
that's probably one of the most famous pieces of merchandise I think in 25 years.
oh yeah.
Next Austin 316. That's probably yep. There you go. You had it right on cue. I was
Yep.
gonna say those two T-shirts basically saved merchandise in the 90s, in my opinion.
Well,
Yeah.
and I think it took merchandising to a whole new level. Like
Well,
the NWO and Austin 316, maybe not specifically each shirt, but
they took some signs from ECW where they didn't look like wrestling shirts. They looked like concert shirts,
yeah.
because they were printed on black shirts. Most concert shirts were printed on black shirts, especially in the 90s. We're talking this was the alternative grunge era of music. Metal was still big in the 90s as well. Um, but yeah, they kind of took a cue from like concert T-shirts and those hard edge, and ECW definitely adapted it, and their merch was awesome, and WWF had a lot of best-selling merch for years. I mean, the Hulkamania shirt in any form was one of the
Yeah.
best-selling shirts, but nothing like Austin 316. Nothing like it. Yeah, yeah. Just that or in an alternate a swap, like how many of those. Yes, yes. Um
Okay, I'm done.
and actually actually it's funny because he had that t-shirt as a heel, I do believe. Uh when
Yeah.
he was transitioning from heel to babyface, he had that shirt out because Piper, even before DiBiase, was mass merchandise. So as a heel.
Yeah.
So
I just remember, yeah, well, after the NWO and Steve Austin becoming what he was, we had talked earlier, a couple episodes about everybody at school all of a sudden had an NWO shirt or an Austin 316 shirt.
yeah.
And I know we're really just kind of posing in for our little fandom. But I think merchandising, and probably with the implementation of online web stores, took merchandising to a whole new level, and guys could, wrestlers could uh, have their stuff sold and collect royalties for forever. I mean, the amount of money that they can make off of merch from like 20 years ago to like now is just incredible compared to buying a Bret Hart poster of him in cowboy boots on a lake.
Yeah. And thank God for Pro Wrestling Tees for establishing a program like that, because yeah, the wrestlers are getting paid for their work finally, and they are getting paid for merchandise because if you watch any of these interviews, a lot of wrestlers say, "Hey, we had all this stuff put out on us, and we never got paid a dime for royalties. Like, but some made millions. Like, say the Iron Sheik, for example. Because he was what these he had to have been one of the best selling LJNs, easy, because you need a heel to beat up, and Iron Sheik's perfect, right?
That's true.
And how many figures did he sell? I mean, look at even in modern times. John Cena, of
Oh,
course, always got the mixed reactions. His merch was going to sell regardless because kids buy it, women buy it, some men buy it. But his main fan base is kids, so he's got the kids. Forget about it; they're going to buy everything. You know what I mean? Just like how I was with Hulk Hogan, I bought everything. So, or tried to get everything.
yeah.
Usually it was birthdays and Christmases when I was a kid. I would ask for all this stuff. But anyways, I'm digressing again. Cena capitalizing on the Cena hate years later collected royalties off of Cena suck shirts. So genius.
Yep.
He was collecting on his own stuff, and he was collecting on the hate. So I mean, eh, do you know of any babyface that has done something like that in recent times?
No, not at
Not
all.
very many.
Yeah.
Not very many.
And I
So
don't know if there's anyone who has ever wrestled that's made more money off of merchandise than John Cena has. I don't have like numbers in front of me, but like you said, this audience with the little kids, parents are going to buy him everything. I, he has to be a trillionaire off of his merchandise alone.
him and Rey Mysterio, I would imagine, they don't have to worry about where their next meal comes from. So because how mass marketed is Rey Mysterio? He's an action figure. He's a mask. You know what I mean?
And he has really distinct shirts that are designed with different masks that he's worn, or like the base for the design. He has some pretty cool looking merch.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And in my opinion, there's no other Mexican wrestler quite like Rey Mysterio. There's a reason he sells that much merchandise. There's a reason he has a fan base the way he does. It's just there's nobody like him. They've tried to replace him. WWE
Sin
has.
Cara.
Sin Cara, Alberto Del Rio, Lucha Party. I mean, Lucha House Party. That is. None of them have even touched Rey Mysterio's numbers or popularity or anything. You know, Alberto was good though. I will say that. So
I know he had a little bit of real life heat with him and Paige later on, and
yeah, yeah,
so that,
a lot of legal trouble to follow too. But
yeah,
you
that
know,
gets tricky.
as far as characters go, he was one of the better ones in my opinion. Of just being a heel, he was a great heel. So,
Yeah. All right.
but yeah, we digressed quite a bit. But
I
getting
know.
back to merch, yeah, it's everyone has their something with merch. It's a crazy world we live in. I mean, things like this, and I can pop this up again.
Yeah.
Uh, Andre the Giant, like when somebody like Funko Pop gets involved, I mean, you're going to be everywhere regardless. The same makers of they make musicians, they make movie
Video
stars.
game characters. Everybody has a pop.
So, when you're involved in this, there's no telling, you know.
So we were there has been a lot of digressing this episode, but to be honest, it's been there's definitely points that I wanted to touch on, but all the little rabbit holes that were very organic to go down for just a very genuine blast for me. One of the things that I had marked down that we didn't get to was the holy grail of wrestling media, Bret Hart and Tom McGee,
Yeah.
are things that are just kind of lost to the wrestling sands of time. What about are there any merchandise items that are maybe well recognized and very sought after that are just rare or impossible to find?
Yeah, all the early WCW merchandise is if you notice, whenever something early WCW merch goes up on eBay, it commands a high dollar because it wasn't as mass marketed as WWE was, you know. And on the same token, ECW merch always holds a high price because, you
Yeah.
know, of what it stood for and also collectability. Uh, those shirts just always hold value, you know. And if you can get a shirt in pretty decent condition, and they all came in XL, so you know that could be a reason for such a high demand because you know, us as skinny kids, I mean, of course we were swimming in those shirts, but now they fit our adult bodies, you know, so you can still wear them and it's
Yeah.
great. But to really quick, I will grab my WCW magazine again and I will show you because they actually have a couple page merchandise catalog in here. And let me see. Okay. So let's see if you recognize any pieces of merch here. Right.
Well, the WCW purple logo, I recognize pretty well.
Right.
Is that a Lex Luger jacket? And there's a foam belt, a WCW foam belt.
Oh, yeah, where are we looking at that?
Yeah.
I mean, did you see any of this merchandise out in the wild?
No. No.
No, I didn't see it. So, um, let me see if I can find. Oh, here's a good one.
They had their own knockoff wrestling buddies.
Yes, they did. Mm-hmm.
And is that a Nintendo game?
Yes, it is. It's World Championship Wrestling for Nintendo. Yes.
I didn't even know that existed.
However, that's an alternate cover because that did not exist. Maybe there's rare copies out there, but the Road Warriors were actually on that game. So yeah,
Yeah.
but if you look, there's some gloobs, you know.
Yeah. And I mean, I would imagine because of where we grew up, we were much more saturated with WWF, shows on television, but also merchandise. WCW was, no, they were the Southerners. They were the Hicks.
Yeah. Oh, and Chris said plaques existed back then. We got some three of the top stars in WWF.
The man, the myth, the legend.
Yep. And these plates, which actually, this Bret Hart plate right here was the topic. It was a hot topic with Bret Hart and I, because he hadn't seen one of these since this thing was printed. So if I had met him in one of the times it was 2013 or 2014, so we're talking this is 1994. We're talking 20 years. He had it had been the last time he had seen one of those plates. So,
do you actually have one of those?
Yes. Brett autographed it. Yeah. So, and took very good careful of it. I have it packed away, but I do have it. Yes.
It's awesome.
Yes. So, and the Hitman shades we'd spoken of, some Bret Hart merch.
Yeah.
Mini leather jacket, like stuff like that. This is actually and it's not like I mean, come on. That's me. That's my old dress.
Moly, it is.
Apparently, I wanted to order the WrestleMania tape, meaning like WrestleMania the album, which
$8.95. God, you can't buy anything for $8.95 anymore.
I wanted to buy actually a grand total with shipping and handling of $12.90. What a sent me. Oh, look at it. There it is.
There they are.
That.
That's exactly what we talked about.
Yes. And then right underneath it, what did we just talk about? Video games, right?
Video games. Yeah, we'll have to do a dedicated episode to that.
Oh, absolutely. So, oh, and we talked music the last episode, right? Do you remember these? You got these
Yeah.
with the fan club.
Yeah. And you could get those at house shows too. I don't know which ones, but my
Really?
dad, yeah, my dad bought me one of those. I for the life of me, I can't remember um even which one it was. I ended up coming across another one later on, but I ended up with one of those, and there's the only place that it could have come from would have had to have been a stand at the house show.
Wow. Maybe he
Maybe I'm
was
wrong, but
maybe he was trying to get you a membership to the fan club.
yeah. Maybe.
Here we got
Oh,
some razor merch.
I remember that Razor shirt.
Oh
The
yeah,
little bear.
they reprinted these since. They're quite popular. And
Yeah.
the razor bear and the razor chain.
Yeah.
What's missing from here is the razor foam razor. It was an actual razor that was made of foam that you bought
Oh,
at events.
yeah.
Yeah.
I had a Bret Hart foam finger, and I remember it got ripped, and my mom sewed it together with fishing line. So the kind of wrap up a little bit, whenever you're talking about media merch, one of the most noticeable changes um, would be this logo.
Yep.
It does not have an F, and it says attitude. And while this is very similar to the Scratch logo, um, it is the WWE logo,
Mhm.
because the pandas kicked Vince's ass. And
Well, more Jerry McDivitt, but yeah.
and for my other belt marks, it is a really big point of contention when you have belts like this with that logo. And this one in particular, there are some things I don't know. I had the Figures Inc. Oval IC European one that had the
Yeah.
Scratch Attitude logo. And another thing that this one is significantly different from is that this isn't white. It's all gold with a little bit of red there, but the WWF Scratch logo was always white. And this is a very modernized big eagle. And that's one of the things that really kind of stands out. See, like here it's white,
Yep.
and it looks, even though it's missing the F, um, it serves its purpose, as just something fun to hang around. But that kind of sticks out like a sore thumb to me.
Yeah.
The straps got a lot nicer. My gosh, the straps on the Figures Inc. belts, they were. This is these are 4 millimeters. I believe every Figures Inc. was only 2, but made them easier to curve. And their straps were like pasted together cardboard. They were awful. And so these have gotten a lot better. But
Nice.
yeah, so you have the big eagle and little gems, little stones all around there. And like I said earlier, there are some guys online now who have businesses. You can send them your titles and they will restone them with higher quality, better looking stones if you care to pay for it. But I know one of my things that I really enjoyed about getting together with you and Tim to do this is, I have my best friends, and we all kind of came together and celebrated wrestling together, and it's such a huge part of our lives. And I've had total in like the late 2000s, probably over a dozen replica belts when they were really expensive and really hard to find. And getting back into it to do these little podcast shows and reminisce, I'm like, now I have an excuse to spend a lot of money and kind of jump back into my favorite part of collecting wrestling merchandise. And I never had a big eagle. I almost got a classic IC or a winged eagle, but I've actually had quite a few of those. And so I thought it'd be nice to just kind of get something that I haven't had before that is from an era that was really significant for all of us. The wrestling business went through adolescence the same time that we did.
Absolutely. Yeah. I always like to say that. And it's 100% the truth. With guys our age, who
Mhm.
have been fans their whole life and has seen these waves, you know what I mean? Where merchandise was more kid stuff. We were kids. Attitude Era became a little cooler to wear your Austin 316 shirt around town and made you kind of feel, maybe you had a little piece of that attitude in you, uh, and uh, going forward, as an adult collector, where you're more focused on preservation and just basically uh, you talk belts, you talk. I have media. Like I like pulling something out, looking at it, and saying, "Wow, this is great to have." You pull the belt out, and you're just looking at it for however long you're looking at it, and you're like, "Wow, this is great to have." They all serve the same purpose, and it's great that every fan has their something like that. I wish that I wish that I was able. I've often told my girlfriend if I can trade my whole collection for one thing, it would have been that flare robe, that butterfly flare robe that they found in Tennessee.
The black
I
one?
I I would literally trade everything I have just for that one thing, because it means that much to me, and it means that much to me for my own reasons, but it means so much to others. I have Flair tattooed on me with part of that robe, the top part. So it's I have a little piece of it, but imagine having the real thing, right?
Yeah,
So
I
uh
think like we had both said earlier, it's whatever it is that our 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 preference is for what we connect. It's what we connect ourselves to that represents the business. And a lot of the guys who have come, and far too many of them have gone um,
mhm.
way too early. And like you said, everybody has their thing. Scott Hall very tragically uh, had some complications from a hip surgery, suffered multiple heart attacks,
Yep,
and
new
passed
story,
away.
new story of the week right there,
Yeah,
and big part of our adolescence for sure. You're wearing his colors right now, so he's got to be somewhat important. I have in the background, you saw it in the last shot. I had a print behind me of the three outsiders. That it was a comic book recreation of the Bash at the Beach. So, um, that moment was very important. To pro wrestling and means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. For us, it shoots us back to that time where all you had was Monday nights and your VHS collection and your magazine just sitting right by you. It just it's something. I I would say fans today don't understand, but really, in the streaming age, which we've come to, and it is great, and it's very convenient for all, because who wants to who wants to really have a wall full of tapes like this besides a glutton for punishment like me, right? But nowadays you have this Peacock network, and for all its faults, I mean, you can get, you know, hundreds of years of wrestling history literally right at your fingertips, and it's great. YouTube, same thing, great, and just I'm really really happy that exists, and there's so much I can say, and I can't fit all the words in one sentence, I guess,
Well, and to kind of, let me wrap up our show. I know I've been thinking a lot about how we could talk about Scott Hall and everything. And if you look back at that time, Austin 316, Steve Austin winning King of the Ring, for in most people's eyes, that is ground zero for the Attitude Era. There's lots of other moments, other promos, events, matches that all tie into it. But right next to that is Scott Hall coming through the crowd on Monday Nitro and interrupting a match and stepping into that ring. And that promo he cut is one of the most significant things, the most significant moments in any part of wrestling history.
And something to interject, unlike the Montreal Screwjob, which if I never see it again, it's great.
Yeah.
Just because I'm so burnt out on it, but I will never ever ever be burnt out on Scott Hall's first appearance on Nitro, and shooting back, because both events have great significance into the pro wrestling business. But I would dare to say that one conjures up I would say one conjures up a great feeling, and one conjures up a what if scenario, and I'd rather that great feeling, to be honest. So that's why I can replay Scott Hall coming out through the crowd over and over and over again for that very purpose.
Yep.
So
All right.
all right.